Most people will never see the collapse coming, and when it hits, the only thing standing between them and real suffering will be what's sitting on their shelves right now. Not gear, not gold, not a bug-out bag packed with gadgets nobody actually knows how to use. Food, the right food, chosen deliberately, stored properly, and built around one principle: keeping you alive and functional when the world outside stops making sense. Here's what nobody in the survival space wants to say out loud. The majority of emergency food advice is designed to sell you something expensive: flashy packaging, freeze-dried gourmet meal kits, exotic superfoods that cost $20 a bag and taste like cardboard soaked in misery. That's not prepping, that's commerce wearing a tactical vest. Real preparedness is boring to look at, it's quiet, it doesn't photograph well for social media, but it works when nothing else does. And it starts with 5 specific foods that cost almost nothing, store for years, and deliver exactly what your body needs when the pressure is at its absolute worst. Miss one of these 5 and your plan has a hole in it. Nail all 5 and you're in a different category entirely. Not just surviving, but stable, fed, and clear-headed while the people around you unravel. One of these foods in particular, the last one on this list, is so consistently overlooked that it borders on a collective blind spot. It's not glamorous, it doesn't come in a survival-branded tin, but it might be the single item that carries you furthest when everything else gets stretched thin. Let's start at the foundation. The first food is rice, and before you scroll past thinking you already know this one, stay with it for a moment. Because the reason rice belongs at the top of this list isn't just about calories, it's about what rice represents in the architecture of a survival stockpile. Everything else gets built on top of it. Think about the last time you heard someone in the preparedness world get genuinely excited about rice. Probably not recently. It doesn't generate clicks, it doesn't move merchandise. A 50-pound bag of white rice costs around $25, and that's exactly the problem for the people trying to sell you $300 emergency food buckets. Rice is too affordable, too effective, and too honest for the survival industry to profit from. So instead, they bury it under marketing for products that sound more impressive but deliver far less. Here's the math, and the math doesn't argue. That same $25 bag of rice contains thousands of real calories, not the inflated snack food calorie counts that vanish the moment your body actually starts working hard. Sustained, dense, reliable energy that keeps organs functioning and muscles moving. On a pure cost-per-calorie basis, almost nothing competes with rice. Certainly not protein bars, not jerky, not freeze-dried meal pouches with 12-step preparation instructions. But here's what makes rice genuinely powerful in a crisis situation. It's not just fuel, it's a psychological anchor. When everything around you is uncertain and frightening, a hot bowl of rice signals something to your brain that no energy bar can replicate. It says the situation is manageable. It says you can keep going. Food psychology is real, and in prolonged stress scenarios, morale isn't a luxury, it's a functional survival variable. The person who feels fed and grounded makes better decisions. The person who feels deprived and desperate makes dangerous ones. Rice also functions as a multiplier. On its own, it carries you. Paired with other foods, it stretches everything else you have. Add a can of vegetables, and suddenly you have a complete meal with almost no effort. Add the next item on this list, and you unlock something even more significant: a complete protein source that rivals anything coming from an animal. Storage is where most people make critical errors with rice. Tossing a bag into a cabinet and forgetting it doesn't count as emergency preparedness. Moisture, insects, and oxidation will destroy improperly stored rice in months. Done correctly, however, rice becomes one of the most durable foods in existence. Sealed in mylar bags with oxygen absorbers, placed inside food-grade buckets, white rice can remain fully edible for 25 to 30 years. That's not a marketing claim, it's a well-documented food science reality. That $25 investment, stored properly, can outlast most of the other items in any emergency kit by decades. Nothing else at that price point comes close. One more thing worth knowing about rice right now. Global prices increased over 14% in the past year alone, driven by droughts in major producing regions, export restrictions by several governments, and shipping disruptions that haven't fully resolved. The window of cheap abundance isn't guaranteed. Every month that passes is a month where the cost of building that foundation climbs slightly higher. The people who move on it now, before another supply chain shock hits, are the ones who be grateful later. If rice is the foundation, the second food is what makes the foundation worth standing on. Beans. Dry or canned, in bulk, stored deliberately. And the gap between people who have beans stacked and people who don't is much wider than it looks from the outside. Here's the single most important thing to understand about beans in a survival context. When combined with rice, beans produce a complete amino acid profile. That means your body gets what it needs to maintain muscle, support cognitive function, and keep the immune system running, without requiring any animal protein whatsoever. This isn't a theory or a nutritional trend. It's the reason entire civilizations survived for centuries on this exact combination, not as a compromise, as a foundation. Modern preparedness culture has a strange relationship with protein. There's a persistent obsession with jerky, canned meats, and freeze-dried protein pouches, all of which are expensive, limited in quantity, and in many cases far less practical than they appear. Jerky is expensive per calorie, has a shorter shelf life than people assume, and doesn't scale well for feeding a household over weeks or months. Freeze-dried meat is better on shelf life, but costs several times what it's worth nutritionally. Beans, meanwhile, cost between $1 and $2 per pound dry, deliver 6 to 8 servings per pound, and store for 20 to 30 years in mylar with oxygen absorbers. That's not a minor difference in value. That's a fundamental difference in what your preparedness budget can accomplish. Dry beans take time and water to prepare. That's a real consideration, not a dismissal. Soaking overnight and simmering requires planning, but that planning is exactly the kind of disciplined thinking that separates serious preparedness from wishful thinking. If the idea of soaking beans feels like too much effort, that's worth examining honestly. Survival requires effort by definition. Beans reward that effort generously. Canned beans are the other half of this equation. No soaking required, no cooking required if it comes to that. Pop the lid and eat directly from the can in a blackout, a bug out, or any situation where fuel and time are limited. Canned beans are heavier per serving than dry, but in a stationary or home-based emergency scenario, weight is rarely the binding constraint. Calories in nutrition are. The economics deserve a clear-eyed look. A single pound of dry beans bought today represents one of the highest value food purchases available anywhere in any grocery store. The per-meal cost at current prices is under 20 cents when calculated honestly. Compare that to any branded survival food product, and the gap becomes almost embarrassing. And like rice, bean prices are not immune to what's happening globally. Lentils, chickpeas, pinto beans, and black beans all saw price increases of 15 to 20% in various markets over the past year, linked to drought conditions, transportation bottlenecks, and supply-side disruptions. The affordability that makes beans such a smart prep choice is real today. It may be meaningfully less real in 2 years. When the next serious disruption hits, and disruptions in food supply chains are no longer rare anomalies, they're recurring events, beans will disappear from shelves with the same speed and finality as toilet paper in 2020. Except this time, the people without beans won't just be inconvenienced, they'll be undernourished. Rice carries you. Beans fuel the machinery that running on rice alone can't sustain. Together, they represent something genuinely powerful, a complete nutritional base that costs almost nothing, stores for a generation, and requires no refrigeration, no power, and no complex preparation. That combination is the core of any serious pantry. But the core alone isn't enough. You also need a fast fuel source, something that bridges the gap between meals, requires minimal cooking, and keeps your energy levels stable without demanding a lot from your fuel supply. Which brings us to the third food, oats. And this one is genuinely and consistently underestimated. Not just by casual preppers, but by experienced ones who should know better. Here's the problem with how most people approach breakfast in a preparedness context. They load up on boxed cereal, instant pancake mixes, and packaged pastry products, comfort foods that worked fine in a normal week but have no place in a serious emergency scenario. Sugar-heavy, nutritionally thin, and dependent on processing and refrigeration that often won't be available. You get a brief energy spike, followed by a crash. And the crash in a high-stress survival situation doesn't just make you feel tired.
It affects your judgment, your mood, and your ability to do physical work. Oats don't do that. Oats provide slow-release carbohydrate energy that keeps blood sugar stable for hours. The person who ate oats at dawn is still functional, still working, still thinking clearly 4 hours later. The person who ate sugary cereal is running on empty by mid-morning. That difference compounds over days and weeks in a way that becomes genuinely consequential. What most people miss about oats is how versatile they actually are when other options disappear. Sweet preparation with honey or dried fruit is the obvious one, but oats also work in savory applications, cooked in broth with canned meat, bulked out with whatever dried spices you have on hand. Ground into rough flour, they can become flatbread, pancakes, or a thickener for soups and stews. Added whole to slow-cooked dishes, they stretch other ingredients further. They adapt to whatever else you have in a way that few foods do. Food fatigue is a serious psychological issue in prolonged emergency scenarios. Eating the same 3 foods in the same rotation becomes demoralizing faster than most people anticipate. Oats break that cycle without requiring you to stockpile 30 different specialty items. A single bag of oats opens up enough variation to keep meals from feeling like punishment. Then there's efficiency. Rice and beans are excellent, but both require substantial cooking time, real fuel expenditure, and meaningful water use. In a scenario where propane, firewood, or clean water is limited, those cooking demands become constraints. Oats need only hot water and a few minutes. If you're truly an extremis, rolled oats can be eaten raw. Not pleasant, but functional and fast. You can't say the same about uncooked rice or beans. The storage profile for oats is straightforward. Standard rolled oats in the original container last 1 to 2 years in a cool, dry pantry. Sealed in Mylar bags with oxygen absorbers, shelf life extends to 10 years. Steel-cut oats and whole oat groats push even further, with groats reaching 20 to 30 years under proper conditions. Portion into smaller, vacuum-sealed bags so that opening one portion doesn't expose the entire supply to air and moisture. Basic discipline here extends your stockpile significantly. The cost reality is simple. A large container of rolled oats costs under $5 at most grocery stores. That $5 represents weeks of breakfasts at under 50 cents per meal. The calorie per dollar ratio rivals rice and beans. No survival product on any shelf matches it at that price point. Prepping companies don't feature oats prominently for the same reason they don't feature rice and beans. There's no margin in cheap, effective food. The business model of the survival industry depends on convincing you that preparedness is complex and expensive. Oats disprove that narrative entirely. What keeps you fueled is half the equation. What keeps you feeling human is the other half. And that brings us to the fourth food, one that doesn't just solve a caloric problem, but a morale one. Flour, or if you're thinking longer term, wheat berries. And this is where the distinction between surviving and suffering becomes most visible. Consider what flour actually enables. At its most basic, flour plus water plus heat equals flat bread. That's it. No yeast, no baking powder, no specialized equipment, just those 3 things. And flatbread transforms every other food in your stockpile. Beans on their own, after 2 weeks of twice-daily servings, become a psychological burden. Beans in a flour tortilla become a meal, not just calorically, but emotionally. The act of breaking bread, literally, across every culture in human history, is tied to something deeper than nutrition. It signals normalcy. It signals community. It signals that things are manageable. Add baking powder or yeast to the equation, and the possibilities expand dramatically. Biscuits, survival bread, simple flat cakes, thick crackers. The monotony that breaks people down in extended emergencies is directly addressed by a bag of flour and some basic knowledge. The person making bread for their family in a difficult situation isn't just feeding them, they're telling them that this is survivable. That's not a small thing. Here's the honest challenge with flour. It doesn't naturally store as rice and beans. A standard bag left in a pantry can go stale, absorb moisture, or attract insects within a year. This is why unprepared people skip it entirely. They assume the storage problem is too complicated. It isn't. Sealed in Mylar bags with oxygen absorbers, white flour extends to 5 years comfortably, often longer. That's a simple, inexpensive solution that removes the obstacle entirely. If you're planning for longer timelines, wheat berries are the real answer.
Whole, unground wheat stored in food-grade buckets with oxygen absorbers can last 30 years or more. A hand-operated grain mill then gives you the ability to grind fresh flour on demand indefinitely. That's not a complicated setup. It's a modest investment in a hand mill and a supply of whole grain that becomes a permanent food security resource rather than a perishable one. The economics here are excellent. Flour currently runs $5 to $7 for a 10-pound bag at most stores. The per-serving cost for bread or tortillas comes out to well under 50 cents. That's nutritionally meaningful, psychologically valuable food for almost nothing. Compare it honestly to freeze-dried camping meals, survival snack bars, or commercially packaged emergency food kits, and the contrast is stark. Global wheat prices have been under significant pressure for the past 2 years. Droughts in major wheat-producing regions, fertilizer cost increases, and export restrictions from several countries have already pushed prices up by double digits. The current price of flour, low as it is, should be treated as a window that won't stay open indefinitely. When bread disappears in a genuine food shortage, it tends to disappear fast and stay gone. Historically, bread scarcity precedes social breakdown faster than almost any other single variable. This isn't alarmism, it's a pattern with centuries of precedent behind it. Carbohydrates give you energy. Protein repairs your body. But there's a third macronutrient that people systematically underestimate in emergency planning, and ignoring it creates a specific, dangerous deficiency that has a name in survival medicine. The fifth food, and it's the one that rounds out everything else. Peanut butter. Or another high-fat, calorie-dense option, but peanut butter specifically, because nothing else at its price point checks as many boxes simultaneously. Here's why fat is non-negotiable and why getting this wrong matters more than most people realize. Calories from carbohydrates give you quick energy. Calories from protein support muscle repair and immune function. But fat does something different. Fat is what keeps your brain running under sustained stress. It fuels cognitive function, supports hormone production, cushions your organs, and helps regulate body temperature in cold conditions. An adequate carbohydrate and protein diet, but insufficient fat, will still produce a specific form of malnutrition that impairs judgment, reduces endurance, and ultimately becomes dangerous. Survival history has documented this clearly. Explorers and military personnel living on lean protein and grains without adequate fat intake developed what became known as rabbit starvation, a condition in which someone is technically eating but still starving at the cellular level because of fat deficiency. It's counterintuitive enough that people miss it in planning, but documented enough that it's taught in wilderness medicine training. Peanut butter fills that gap completely and does it with remarkable efficiency. A single 2-tablespoon serving contains close to 200 calories, split across fat, protein, and carbohydrate in a ratio that sustains energy without spiking blood sugar. A standard 16-ounce jar contains roughly 2,800 to 3,000 calories. That jar costs between $2 and $4 at almost any grocery store. Do the math. Under 15 cents per 100 calories. Lower than almost any other calorie-dense survival food available. lower than protein bars, lower than any commercially branded survival product you can name. The versatility of peanut butter in a limited pantry becomes increasingly clear as meal options shrink. Spread on flatbread made from that flour stockpile, it becomes a complete meal. Stirred into oatmeal, it transforms a plain bowl into something calorie-dense, protein-forward, and genuinely satisfying. Mixed into rice and broth, it creates a sauce with real substance. Eaten directly from the jar with no preparation whatsoever, it delivers immediate energy without fire, fuel, water, or dishes. That last point matters enormously in mobile or displaced scenarios. If you're moving quickly, if you're without power, if you're conserving every calorie of cooking fuel, peanut butter requires nothing from you. Open it and eat. That kind of operational simplicity is worth more than its nutritional profile alone suggests. Storage behavior is better than most people expect. A sealed jar in a cool, dark location stays fresh for 1 to 2 years easily, often significantly longer. The commercially processed versions, not the natural oil-separating kind, are more stable for emergency storage purposes. The natural varieties have shorter shelf lives and are more susceptible to rancidity without refrigeration. For a health-conscious regular diet, natural peanut butter makes sense.
For a survival stockpile where reliability and longevity are the priority, the conventional shelf-stable version is the correct choice. Alternatives exist. Almond butter, sunflower seed butter, and tahini all provide fat and calories. Olive oil and coconut oil are useful supplemental fat sources, but none of them combine the cost, the shelf stability, the calorie density, and the universal palatability of peanut butter at scale. Oil goes rancid faster. Specialty nut butters cost 2 to 3 times more per serving. Peanut butter is the anchor, and the others are supplements. Then there's the barter dimension, which is worth thinking through seriously. In a genuine extended crisis, everyone will have rice. Many people will have canned goods. Relatively few will have thought ahead about fat. Peanut butter's scarcity, combined with its universal appeal and the physical comfort it provides, makes it one of the highest value barter items imaginable in a resource-constrained environment. A jar of peanut butter in a world of plain grains and vegetables represents luxury and nutrition simultaneously. That kind of item gives you leverage. One warning that shouldn't be ignored. Peanut crop yields have been under increasing strain from drought and input cost inflation. Peanut butter prices already rose close to 10% in the past year in several markets. Like rice, beans, oats, and wheat, the current price represents a window. Stockpiling at today's rates means locking in caloric insurance before the next disruption recalculates that cost upward. Here's what all 5 of these foods have in common. They're not exciting. They don't make good content. The survival industry doesn't push them because there's no margin in things this cheap and this effective. Each of them, individually, is a solid choice. Together, there's something more, a complete interlocking system that covers caloric needs, macronutrient balance, psychological resilience, and long-term storage stability without requiring a significant financial investment or specialized knowledge. Rice is the foundation. It gives you dense, affordable, psychologically grounding caloric energy that stores for 30 years and costs pennies per serving. Beans are the muscle. They complete the protein profile that rice can't provide alone. They store for decades and cost under 20 cents a meal when purchased in bulk. Oats are the bridge. Fast to prepare, fuel efficient, versatile across sweet and savory applications, and capable of breaking the food fatigue that quietly destroys morale in extended emergencies. Flour, or wheat berries, are the humanity, the thing that turns the survival ration into a meal, that gives your family something resembling normalcy when the world outside is the opposite of normal. Peanut butter is the wild card, the fat source that most people forget until it's too late, the thing that keeps your brain functioning and your body running when carbohydrates alone aren't enough. These 5 foods don't require electricity, they don't require refrigeration, they don't require a subscription box, a special order, or a $300 investment. They require a trip to a regular grocery store and the deliberate decision to prioritize function over novelty.
Most people will make the wrong choice. They'll spend money on packaged survival products that look serious but underdeliver. They'll stock snacks and comfort foods that vanish in days. They'll buy things they've seen advertised as preparation and call it done. And when an actual disruption arrives, not a dramatic Hollywood collapse, but the kind of rolling, grinding supply chain failure that has already happened multiple times in the past 5 years, those choices will show themselves clearly. The people who built their pantry around these 5 essentials won't be scrambling. They won't be competing with panicked crowds for the last bags of whatever's left on bare shelves. They'll be at home, eating real food, thinking clearly, and in a fundamentally different position than the people around them. That's not a fantasy scenario. That's a practical outcome of making better decisions today than most people are making. The 5 foods exist. They're available right now, and they're affordable right now. Neither of those facts is guaranteed to remain true indefinitely. If you found this useful, take a second to like this video. It helps this channel reach more people who need this kind of clear, honest information. This is my channel, and the whole point is to cut through the noise and give you what actually matters. Drop a comment below and tell me, if you could only choose one of these 5 to stockpile deep, which one would it be? I want to see where people land on that. Stay clear, stay deliberate. Real preparedness doesn't start with the right gear or the right location. It starts with the right food already in your home, already waiting.